And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most tantalizing topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 142nd edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 535th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, October 10th, 2019. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
For this week's banner moment, we have to go back to Saturday's Hoosier Hysteria, and it occurred midway through the event after the introductions were complete and after Calbert Chaney had treated the DJ like Dwayne Morton and demanding some intro music that he could dance to. That's when Indiana sent out a release saying that Rob Phinisee, Devontae Green, and Deron Davis would all be held out of the rest of the event as a precaution. Now, obviously, having three guys held out of the fun and games of Hoosier Hysteria after only 1 week of practice isn't a positive, especially when it's three guys whose various absences last year cost Indiana an NCAA tournament bid. But what immediately struck me about the release was whose name was not on it: Jerome Hunter. Given all of the uncertainty surrounding Jerome's health this offseason, I don't think anyone would have been surprised to see him held out of Hoosier Hysteria as a precaution. Unfortunately, we've all had to learn to temper our expectations when it comes to Jerome's availability, which is why seeing Jerome truly have the green light to participate in all activities was so encouraging. And to be fair, this has been Archie's stance on it for more than a month now. This was just the first public evidence backing up all the public pronouncements. Now, it's worth noting that this doesn't mean that Jerome is out of the woods yet with his mysterious leg condition. He acknowledged in his post-event remarks that it's still a day-by-day thing. But regardless, Saturday represented an important stepping stone toward him becoming a regular part of the IU rotation who can be counted on for consistent minutes in production. And sure, Jerome's performance in the scrimmage was encouraging too. The beautiful turnaround fadeaway jumper that he kissed off the glass and his great assist to Joey Brunk were two of the biggest highlights of the short scrimmage. It was a reminder of the versatile skill set he possesses that, if available last season, might have swung at least one or two losses into the win column. But production in a scrimmage in which two of the three experienced guards don't play is really beside the point. What really mattered is simply that Jerome played at all, and that he looked healthy and comfortable doing so. After the event, while answering questions from media members, Jerome said, quote, "I'm happy to be back out there." Joy spread across his face as he said it. It was a reminder of what he's had to go through over the past year, and a reminder that as happy as we all are to see him back on the court, it surely pales in comparison to how happy he must feel to just be able to be back out there playing again. Quote, "I love the fans here," he said. "The feeling is mutual. And if Hoosier Hysteria was a sign that Jerome is truly ready to be a full-time player for Indiana, it means Archie Miller will have the versatile wing scorer with a reliable jump shot that this team's projected rotation so desperately needs." All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. Coach is off this week, but he's dropping knowledge with the chat mob, as always.
When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
That's right. Coach is all of our teacher. To my left, he is the Dave Roberts of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the world's most renowned and occasionally angry bracketologists.
Oh, crap. No, stop doing that. Hey, you shut up. Yes, in addition to being comfortable, the sweatshirt is a great thing that you can use to cover your mouth and scream obscenities into while you're watching a game like this. It's time to shut the down, folks.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your Bottoms line on the last week in Indiana basketball?
I would have been really impressed if you could have turned around what I said before the show when I arrived and get it in there that quickly. But alas, you were unable to do it.
It's coming.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? It's hard to go a different direction than what you did, really. It's, you know, as you guys said, after Hoosier Hysteria, in a bold move for Ryan to say basically at the beginning of the show, I thought this whole thing was a waste of time, but gather around and listen to us talk about it for 45 minutes.
It was a waste of time.
So anyway, yeah, you really can't, it's hard to take a lot away. As you said, the guys that weren't there made it difficult, and just the general atmosphere and everything else was a little bit tough to get a read on. So all you can really go back to is being able to see a guy like Jerome, who everybody has, you know, all the rumors and speculation of what he is, what he could be. Is he going to be back? Is he not going to be back? Just to see him out there, and you could see glimpses of what that's going to be. And I think it's another chance to kind of remind everybody, like, it's going to be a slow process for him. It's easy to get excited about some of the things that he did. But I also think it's been, a year plus since he's really played in a competitive game situation. You don't really know what his conditioning, certainly they've been doing things off the court, but to what extent that, gets him ready for, game action. I think, again, if you're careful with him and work yourself into a place where around the middle of the season, around the start of Big Ten play, that maybe he's really, finally starting to hit his stride, I think that would be a positive. But, regardless, it was great to see him out there. Again, you could see some of the things that everybody wants to see him do on the floor, and the kinds of skills and things that this team is going to need to be, to kind of outperform the preseason expectations that everybody's talked to death at this point. So, exciting to see him there. Otherwise, don't know that you take a whole lot away, but at least a good thing to see him out there and have some pseudo real action to talk about.
And to my right, he is a senior writer at the Big Lead, the world's #1 unemployed shot doctor, and he is, sadly, currently suffering from a debilitating ankle injury that he suffered earlier this week while being chased through Waterfront Park in San Diego by one of Dean Spanos' revenge-thirsty henchmen. Fortunately, Ryan avoided capture, but he could not escape injury. Friends, please join me as we bow our heads in a moment of sympathy for Ryan's ankle, which is currently swollen to about 15 times its normal size, and somehow probably impacts his ability to check Gmail.
I should have never told you that.
Ryan, if you can manage it through the pain, what is your rant this week?
Don't make fun of my pain, man. It sucks.
Would you like the background music for your rant?
Yeah, you can shut it off. It's fine. No, and when I told you I hadn't checked Gmail yet, it's because I was at the doctor getting x-rays on it because it was so bad. But yes, I am surviving over here.
Year 9, when we go to Gmail humor.
I know my girlfriend came home today and I showed her the ankle. She's like, yeah, whatever. And I was walking around there. She's like, babe, what is wrong with your ankle? I didn't see the bruising. And there's just a huge bruise everywhere. She said in the light, she hadn't seen how bad it was. So thanks for the sympathy. Anyway, no, I think that where I'm at right now, I mean, not a lot has happened since we talked to you guys last after Hoosier Hysteria. I just think that finally we're at a point where all the offseason stuff is done. I mark Hoosier Hysteria as like the last, like the demarcation line of the offseason. Even Hoosier Hysteria feels like an offseason event, kind of. And then it's like the next day they get to actual work. And so I feel like finally, after, we've waited a long time for basketball, and but kind of a quiet offseason, really. And so I'm just ready to start, getting to talk about actual games, and I'm ready. Bring on Gannon. Just bring on Gannon. That's what I'm ready for it. But I think it's nice to finally have them be actually practicing and have actual stuff to talk about.
All right, well, here's what we're going to talk about this week. We will run through a few Hoosier headlines, but then we're going to spend some time discussing really the single most important player on this year's roster. And finally, we're going to answer your questions, a lot of good ones. So we're going to save some extra time for questions today. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all that, though, I do want to talk about tickets real quick. You have a lot of options when it comes to where you get your sports tickets. And this isn't an industry that is known for its growth, innovation, and customer friendliness. But with millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee, SeatGeek proves that there's a better way. They built the fastest way to find tickets so that you can stop searching for the perfect seat and instead start enjoying it. Just look at the App Store. SeatGeek has over 50,000 five-star reviews, and the reason is because they deliver a better process for buying tickets. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, and then they rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10 with a color-coded system to show the value. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced. Then they display the tickets on an interactive seat map so you can see right where they are. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone because it's by far the easiest and fastest way to find tickets. Going to get concert tickets on there. Actually, already got concert tickets on there. And I just looked, and people have used the Assembly Call code to buy IU Florida State tickets. I saw someone bought St. Louis Cardinals tickets. There was a concert of someone whose name I don't know because they're probably a current pop star. So you can pretty much get everything there on SeatGeek, which is why it's a good place to stop for your tickets.
Can a brother get some coupons?
Yes, you can. SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. So download the SeatGeek app today and use the promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. All right, gentlemen. Well, I want to begin this show by honoring a listener of the week. And this honor goes out, as it did last year, to Valerie, who was at Hoosier Hysteria and, inspired by my proclamation of being president of the Devontae Green fan club, got the Lindy Sports cover autographed by Devontae Green, which you can see right there.
Nice.
Just like she did last year with the Juwan Morgan one. And Valerie also sending posters my way. So Valerie, huge. She's always looking out for us. Valerie's incredible. I hope she's listening tonight. We really, we appreciate everything that you do for the show. So I wanted to give
also
her
shows that Jerod's affection can be bought. Let's not be. Let's not beat around the bush.
We've always known that was true, Andy. You and I know that's true.
Okay, guys. So, Ryan, you pretty much said it. I mean, nothing has happened really since Hoosier Hysteria. Not a lot of news. Jeff Rabjohns reported that Dawson Garcia will take his IU official visit October 25th through the 27th. So that's obviously big news. That's kind of the next big official. Christian Lander was there for Hoosier Hysteria. Trey Kaufman.
Did we get the list of
as well.
Who else was it? Trey Kaufman was there, and then
Kaufman, Lander, Galloway and Leo were on their official visits and stuff. Caleb First was there, and I think some younger recruits were there as well.
Gotcha.
There
I wasn't sure we got a definitive list. Last I heard, we hadn't. So
yeah, and then I was interested to see that Romeo Langford cleared to practice. He's been working on his jump shot. Ryan seems like he's kind of quickened the release on it a little bit. He only measured at 6'4", so a little bit shorter than what he was listed at Indiana.
I would have thought 6'5".
Yeah, the NBA is getting real serious about making sure guys are the right height. Steve Green and Brian Sloan both signed the alumni wall. And then, I was kind of wondering, where are the off-season videos? And then I forgot that Alex Sherrill, who did those videos, moved on, took a job with the Knicks. So it seems like Indiana has not filled that position. So if you're wondering why there haven't been as many videos this offseason, that is probably a reason why.
And
nice to get some of those.
Yeah, we know that Archie is someone who wants that kind of stuff. He wanted to modernize the social media and all that. So I'm surprised they haven't filled that position.
And coach's feedback on the videos last year carried some weight.
I don't want to see about vertical leaps anymore.
Well, it took Archie a long time to fill the third assistant position, so maybe he's just very deliberate and wants to get the right guy instead of rushing into it. That's what we'll go with. So, Andy, any headlines for you? I mean, it's I think we're all kind of at the same point as Ryan said. Hoosier Hysteria happened. Let's get to Gannon.
Yeah, I think the Garcia. The Garcia news from a recruiting standpoint is certainly important. Although I would imagine there seemed to be kind of a weird flurry of guys making commitments earlier than normal. But I would tend to think that his will probably last into the spring. So I'm not sure that there be anything imminent, but
maybe if they wow him in Bloomington, he'll
maybe. And no, other than that, I mean, in terms of you had in the rundown, any other lingering thoughts from Hoosier Hysteria? And I thought the other guy that stood out in at least the parts that I was able to catch was Al. And I don't think that's terribly surprising in that setting, a guy who's established himself as a leader and shown the ability to continue to grow over the course of his career. So I don't know that should be surprising to anybody. But I thought him and Trace had some, showed some good things and that let you kind of spin forward in your mind what he is going to be as he, gets used to the competition level and all those kinds of things. So
yeah, Trace's movement looked really good. Just even like on his dunking and things like that. He looked quicker. He looked, I don't want to say he ever looked heavy, but he looked kind of bulky when he was making his movements in high school. He looks real fluid, and I think that the weight program has really helped him so far.
Cliff Marshall. I mean, he looks like an NBA athlete out there.
Yeah,
and got skill to it, but I mean, just the way he looks, he is an impressive athlete.
And I always thought he looked like a really talented player who had some athleticism, but the way he was moving, like running up and down the floor and things like that, you can just tell sometimes guys just loosen up and it feels like he's a lot more flexible, a lot more loose. And then, you see his arm and leg movements and he just looks like a guy who's, unlocking some extra athleticism there.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on because we got a lot to talk about with Rob, and then we want to get to some of these questions. So let's keep it rolling. Coming up, we are going to talk about the guy whose growth and development is essential if Indiana is going to beat its preseason expectations. That is Rob Phinisee. Where does he rank among Big Ten point guards, and what do we expect from him this season? Stick with us. We're going to discuss that next on the Assembly Call. All right. Hello to everybody watching live. Good to see you all here.
Some people in the chat are saying that Garcia has said he will sign in the fall. I hadn't seen that.
Even better.
I hadn't.
I had heard Jay says that IU and Marquette are the perceived leaders. I have heard that as well. So
yeah. And by the way,
why would anyone want to ever live in Milwaukee? I mean,
play for the great Wojo.
It'd be foolish to live in Milwaukee. Who would
the
ever?
great Wojo.
For those who don't know, I lived in Milwaukee for 2 years by choice. It's a really fun town. My alcohol consumption since moving away from Milwaukee has dropped precipitously. All of that is true. It actually was a fun for the 6. Yeah, there is a drop for everything. For the 6 months that it's not winter in Milwaukee, it's actually a really fun town. It is. There's something for like it's a very active town. It's like a 5K or a bike race every weekend. Everybody's out on the water. Like it's great. But the problem is, it's winter for 6 months, legitimately for 6 months. And I decided to move back to San Diego as a result.
A wise choice. I think
so. I think so. You guys are both
swinging the pendulum back in a good direction.
Yeah, you guys are both
seem.
Here. It's not bad.
I would say so. Unless you're a football team, why would you ever leave San Diego?
I have no idea.
By the way, I made light of it, but you sent me a picture of your ankle. It looked horrific. How long would that keep you out if you were a basketball player? Is this like a 4 to 6 week injury?
Probably a couple weeks. Yeah. No, I mean, and the swelling has gone down because I've done this many times before. They actually on the X-ray. So on the X-ray, it's just precautionary. They take the X-ray and in the write up in there, they're like, it looks like there's a broken bone that healed. I've never had a broken ankle. It turns out that when I was 20, on the night before my 21st birthday, I was playing in a league here in San Diego with a bunch of ex-college players, rolled my ankle over horribly, like so bad that I felt like about 6 pops as it went down. I thought I had broken it. And so I went the next day on my 21st birthday to get it checked out by doctors and all this stuff. And they said that I had whatever the worst grade of sprain is. I don't know what it is, but basically it's you tore all the ligaments in your ankle. And they think that looking at this X-ray, they think I also broke my ankle as part of that, like broke a bone off of it. It is healed. It's like reattached, but they can see that on the X-ray. And so I was like, I knew it. I knew I had broken my ankle, but that one was so bad. There was bruising on the bottom of my foot all the way up to my knee. Like that's how it was black and blue all the way to my knee. I've never seen anything like. My dad, who is a doctor, was freaked out by it. This one's not as bad. It's just my entire foot is kind of bruised. But I mean, I've done it so many times. I know exactly. You ice it, you elevate it, compression, whatever. So it's not as bad. It hurts like heck, but it's not as swollen as it was. It's that swelling's like spread out over the ankle. But yeah, I sent you the picture I took right after it happened, and looks like a softball is growing out of my ankle.
Yeah, it does. It does. All right. On that note, let's talk Rob Phinisee.
Oh, so for the listeners, no, I'm not wearing a walking boot. I'm just wrapping it. No wearing a walking boot.
Ooh, no walking boot.
No.
Hey, by the way, speaking of walking boots, I had an extra 15 minutes today. I went back and found the audio from the IU Mississippi Valley State game from 2015.
Why on earth would you do that?
Well, because we had been talking about it the other day with the infamous
that little turnaround jump shot he had.
Yeah, Jeremiah April.
We can play. Well, we'll play the longer conversation at the end of the show because it's different than you might remember. Andy wasn't on the show; it was just you and me, and we have like a 3-minute conversation, in depth about Jeremiah April's.
Yeah, because he was a 7-footer with a little bit of athleticism.
The length of that discussion exceeded the length of his playing time over the course of his
What's
time.
funny is, what's funny isn't the conversation we had, because a guy like that moving pretty well makes a turnaround jumper. All right, hey, he's showing something. It was for the rest of the entire season. You kept bringing it up. Like every other show, IU has nothing on the inside. Why don't we bring in Jeremiah April?
Okay, no. I did not say it in that context. It was never a serious. I did bring it up, but it was.
You did bring it up like every other show.
Jeremiah April is real.
I'm just amused by how different our voices sound. Just
Yeah.
because we were younger and we were using that other system.
We had hope. We had ambition. We had dreams.
Yeah. Now we haven't
So
made
full
an
of
NCAA
life.
tournament
All
in
of it,
3
all of it
years.
gone.
So full of life.
All of it gone. Now we're just here collecting paychecks. That's it.
All right, let's get into.
Okay,
On
let's
that
talk
note,
Rob
let's get into
Phinisee.
Rob Phinisee.
Longest segment one break ever. All right, here we go. Here we go.
This is Verdell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater? The full court dribble and a perfectly placed pass to set it all up. And of course celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Verdell. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast, or if you want to watch those replays and see all the between segment banner, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall.
I gotta
Jerod
say,
Morris?
I'm sorry. I gotta say something about Verdell in that intro, Jerod. Is he one? He's one of those few guys who is way more beloved after his career than during his career. Have you noticed that as well?
Yes.
People always bring him up as like a man. I loved Verdell Jones. It's like, and he
It's
was
because the brunt of 3 years of frustration was taken out on him.
and that wasn't
unfairly.
fair, obviously.
Right. And then people actually realized, oh, wait, that was, kind of unfair how we treated Verdell. And, and I think unfortunately, the way that his career ended, I think gave him a little bit of sympathy at the very end. But I think for the most part, the positive feelings people have about him is because, that guy was put in a tough spot and was actually a pretty good player.
Well, and it's funny, Bill, because like I hear his cameo and I'm like, that makes me happy. Like hearing from Verdell. Yeah. Like I don't know. I think that it's weird how sometimes those guys go so underappreciated when they're on campus and then.
And he was part of the resurgent team in 2012 and was part of that big moment, so that really helped. And we would have won the Big Ten tournament if he hadn't gotten hurt, dadgummit.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He's got to come back sign the alumni wall.
Yeah, he does. Yes, he does. Okay, gentlemen, speaking of point guards who played a lot as freshmen, let's talk about Rob Phinisee. Because, we've spent a lot of time talking about Jerome Hunter and talking about Devontae Green and Al Durham and, Trace Jackson Davis. It feels like it's been a while since we've brought the conversation back to Rob Phinisee. And I think it's important that we do that because it's easy to get caught up with all of these other guys, and they're all important. We all know that. But there is no path to Indiana exceeding preseason expectations that does not include Rob taking a giant step forward. And I'm not talking about just from his overall numbers for last season, because as we're going to get into, those, they're not that impressive. And they were depressed by, the injury that he had that really affected him during the middle of the season. But he's got to take a step forward and build on the inflated numbers that he had when you remove the concussion from the equation. Because those numbers, 4 or 5 assists per game, shooting 40% from 3-point range. I mean, he was really coming along, really even better than you could expect from a freshman point guard. And when we talk about, this Indiana team possibly, finishing in the top half of the Big Ten, making the NCAA tournament, this is a guy that we think is going to be the workhorse. I think we all agree he'll probably play the most minutes on the team, either he or Devontae Green. And I think it's fair to say, Andy, that he's going to be the catalyst for this team. On offense, as the point guard, he's not going to be the leading scorer. He's not the spark plug like Devontae Green, but he's the catalyst. And certainly defensively, with the way that he plays on the ball, how smart he is, and how important that position is for the kind of defense Archie wants to play, he's going to spearhead the defense. And if he can do it like he did in the Marquette game, in the Michigan State game, and some of his finer moments, that's a path for Indiana to have a top 20 defense. So, any way you look at it, he is absolutely essential for this team getting to where we all think that they can be.
Well, I think, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. I think defensively, you touched on watching him play against Cassius Winston toward the end of the Michigan State game, as we were there last year, was, kind of peak defensive version of Rob, I would say. And so if he can be able to do that over really at the point of attack, that can be incredibly disruptive. And then on the flip side of that, I think it's you look at the general, lack of depth or lack of another true point guard behind him. I think that puts, increased burden on him to really be able to, run the show and be able to get guys where they need to be. Archie's talked a lot more about, better ball movement and player movement this year. So I think that puts more onus on the point guard than the system that was being run last year that was so, ball screen heavy and things like that. Now, whether that actually happens remains to be seen, but at least in what, Archie's comments have been that there'll be a, different look to the offense in that regard, which I think will be a welcome different look to many. But that does put more on Rob's plate and be able to get guys into sets and in the right spots and all those kinds of things. But I think he can handle it. And it's hard to really, it is a little bit hard to assess him over the course of his freshman season because there's a normal or at least expected freshman trajectory that you might expect from a guy, and where he started was, I think, higher than what people thought. And so everybody projected that forward and said, here's the trajectory he's going to be on. Well, the middle of the season just kind of dropped off the table and almost started over in some ways. And I think so he missed out on some of those opportunities to really grow in that scenario. Everything was so disrupted by the concussion. And you have this stretch of games. I was looking through his game log where everything is just terrible. And then all of a sudden you see it finally starts to come back. So, hopefully there's at least been that trajectory and progression from where he was at the end of the season through the off season. But I agree with you. He's maybe more just from having another guy with his skill set, the least replaceable guy, I guess. If you think of it that way, at least there's nobody else on the roster who could clearly step in and take that spot.
And, Ryan, the thing that I think is interesting when you look at he and Devontae is, and obviously there are question marks about the backcourt, but I think offensively there's a chance those guys can fit really well together, because Devontae is the scorer. He's a guy who's going to be risky. He's going to, make some plays, and he's obviously going to, make some plays that aren't that good. Rob is much steadier and can kind of help balance it out, help smooth things out. And I think those two being able to play off of each other really, may take a little while to kind of get that chemistry going. But I really think that could be something that's a potent 1-2 combo in the backcourt for Indiana.
Yeah, I agree. I think that their games really match up well. I think that as far as scoring, I think that Devontae's better off the ball, being set up and then being able to get, and being able to run off screens or something like that, then get the ball and be able to work, as opposed to just bringing it up and trying to create something. And I think that Rob became, at times looked like a pretty good catch and shoot guy last year off of reversals and things like that. So, if you've got him bringing the ball up and you've got Devontae playing off of him, I think that's the ideal situation for Indiana. I do think those two guys can play off of each other, and I think they can both play defense together on the perimeter. And then you throw in another guy like Al, and it's sort of a different weapon as well. So I think that they do match up well together, not just offensively, but sort of the whole package of what they can each bring to the table. So I don't know. I think that that's a good setup for Indiana. We'll see how it actually plays out, but I think that that's a pairing that will work well in the backcourt.
Yeah, and Rob also is a guy who seemed to get more comfortable penetrating and driving to the basket as the season went on. He's very good at feeding the post, which is going to be important for the way that Indiana wants to play, with probably a really good back-to-the-basket postman in at all times. And he's very good catch and shoot, from passes out of the post, which we saw a number of times. And all of those are going to be useful skills for the way that Indiana wants to play. And, Archie also wants to play up tempo, and Rob is going to be the guy who's, he is much more comfortable leading a break than Al is, and he's much smarter with his decision-making than Devontae is. I often think Devontae is better as a trailer or doing something off a pass rather than leading the break. And so,
I agree.
For all of those reasons, Andy, as you said, he's got really an irreplaceable offensive skill set for Indiana. And, that's why, to me, he's probably going to get as many minutes as he can handle. And so, it's going to be a big burden on him on the offensive and defensive end. But, Andy, I looked at Bart Torvik's projections, not to say that they're the best or anything, but he's got his preseason projections out, and he's pretty low on Indiana. And one of the reasons why I think he's low on Indiana is, to me, his projections for Rob, they do not match with what I'm expecting. His projections are 7.2 points per game, 2.7 assists, 2.9 rebounds, playing 64% of minutes with an 18% usage rate. And just to give you some context, full season numbers last year, Rob averaged 6.8 points, 2.9 assists, 3.3 rebounds, played 61% of minutes, usage rate was 16.9%. When I look at those, Andy, to me, Rob's going to play 80+% of the minutes, be a 10+ point scorer, and should average, north of 4 assists per game if you just look at what he was doing last year outside of the games, sandwiched in the middle with all those concussions. And so, if you start to put those projections up to what I think we all think would be a more reasonable rate, now, you're bumping Indiana up a little bit more. And so I think, again, as you look for, okay, what are some reasons why Indiana can outperform these expectations? I don't think people who didn't see all the games and don't have the full context understand how much the concussion affected him and depressed his numbers. And, so I think he's going to surprise some people with how well he plays.
Yeah, and that's one of those where I'm not smart enough to know how stuff like that would factor into Bart's model, because there is game data to take in from the time when he was kind of working his way back. And I mean, if you look at the game log on KenPom, it's like brutal for a long stretch in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
But if you look at the last 8 games, where he really you could see a little bit of progression. So starting with that Wisconsin game, he had an offensive rating of 100 or more in 6 of those 8 after, rarely doing that over the, prior 8 games. He had at least 4 assists in 7 of those 8 games. IU only lost once. That was the Wichita State game when he had 4 more assists. And so the scoring wasn't always big. And that's, maybe the only pushback that I would give to you. And I think it's kind of a question of trying to figure out, what's an optimal mix for him in terms of like, points per game average versus assists. I think if he's in the, 5 assist range, then maybe scoring 8 points a game as opposed to, being a double figure guy or something like that is perfectly acceptable. And maybe what's better
he's a real
team.
Point guard. Yeah.
So I think that's
but he showed.
I think that's a hard
school.
one, is figuring out how to strike that balance. But go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, I mean, he showed in high school that he's good at understanding when he needs to push it and score and when not to. And some of that may be determined, okay, is Jerome Hunter ready to play 20 minutes, 25 minutes and assume a scoring role? Are Brunk and Deron Davis, healthy and consistent down low? If Indiana can win with Rob scoring 4 points a game, he'll probably do it. I don't think that's going to be the recipe for victory. I think he'll have to score between, probably 9 or 11, and there may be some games when other guys are struggling, and they're sagging down low, that he's going to have to step up and knock down some shots and score 15 or 16. But he has shown throughout his basketball career that ability to adapt, and he even did it some last year too.
Well, and let's remember that last year in the backcourt, you had Romeo Langford kind of sucking up all the oxygen. Not as a negative to Romeo. He had to do that. But I think that he deferred a lot to Romeo. And as he gets older and more mature, I don't think he's going to do that he doesn't need to do that as much. Now, you're right. It's going to depend on who he's in the lineup with. Is Jerome Hunter out there to score off the wing? So remember, Rob can get to the hoop. He got to the hoop a lot last year, whether it was to pass or just to sort of run through the defense and find an opening. But it's going to be interesting to see how his game evolves from one year to the next. Best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores. That this is, going to have to be something where he is going to have to take a step forward. I agree. I don't think that he's got to score 10 to 12 points a game for Indiana to be great. I think he's got to be able to take his shots and hit them when he gets them. He's got to be able to knock down threes. He's got to be able to, if the floor is spread, he's got to be able to cut through and get to the hoop and either give it up or score it. I think it's more what kind of player he has to be than the numbers to me to be a really effective guy, because Devontae can be the guard that scores more. We've seen that.
And some of it may depend on how ready Al is to be a consistent scorer. Because Al is a guy last year that, would have, 10 points, 12 points, 13 points, nothing, and would just, throw a 0 up there. Al is going to have to be more consistent. And if he's ready to be that guy, then, that reduces some of that scoring pressure on Rob too. What I do think, Ryan, to your point, he's got to be able to step up and make shots to keep defenses honest, to allow his penetration game to work. And he's got to become more efficient around the basket. His 2-point field goal percentage last year was, 37.5%, something like that. Yeah. Obviously, he's a small guy.
Really bad at one stretch in the season.
It was, but he's got to get better at that, and he's got to knock down free throws when he gets there, because he wasn't a particularly good free throw shooter last year. So those are some of the things to work on.
Let's just say this right now. Everybody knock down free throws when they get there.
This is true.
Yeah, that is one thing that I was struck by, and looking back at the numbers, is just how low his shooting percentages were, even 3-point percentages, which took a pretty big dip after the beginning of the season. I mean, he ended up 31% from 3, as you mentioned,
40 pre-concussion.
Under 40% on twos, and those are not a not a meaningless number of attempts. 129 twos, he made 51, 87 threes, he made 27. So those numbers have to get better to be able to allow him to be a threat. And to Ryan's point, being able to finish around the basket when he does drive, that's something that has to get better. I think if you look at the positives, even while struggling in conference play, his turnover rate was under 12%, which is a really good foundation for a freshman really stepping into some difficult situations. So if you want to look at the glass half full approach, you would look at that and his numbers down the stretch and feel like you've got a pretty good guy that's going to improve upon an assist rate last year that was decent, but it has some room to grow and already has a low turnover rate, which is something that you would not expect from a freshman point guard at all. So,
and if you look at his season, it's weird. He kind of hit the freshman wall really late in the year because he was fine, had the concussion, and then once he got back and was playing more, he was okay, but it seemed like he tired out at the end of the year. If you look at the numbers, I mean, I don't think we felt that at the time, but it seemed like from the Rutgers game through the postseason, he really, offensively, his numbers were not great. And
he was a little up and down, like the Ohio State game. He was basically non-existent.
Yeah, exactly. What game was it that he got the concussion in? Was it Central
Jacksonville? Or whatever that last.
No, it was Central. It was Central Arkansas.
The game that he played 7 minutes.
Yeah, because he only played 7 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and that's where he had really started to build some good momentum at that point. I mean, he had scored 12, 10, and 9 points in the 3 games prior.
Had the big shot against Butler too.
To that, and that was right after the Butler game. So you can definitely see where that trajectory that I talked about just really got thrown off course pretty quickly in that scenario.
And it's crazy because if you look at where Indiana was, they beat Northwestern, won at Penn State, beat Louisville, beat Butler, beat Central Arkansas, and then it just fell off a cliff because Rob got hurt. And I don't know if the two are necessarily there's not necessarily a direct link there, but you lost an emerging contributor.
Sure felt like it in the moment.
Yeah, it did. And you lost an emerging contributor that maybe could have made up for some of the deficiencies from other people. It wasn't just like you lost this guy and that production was taken away. You lost a guy who was improving while other guys were dropping off. And so, and there's ebbs and flows like that in the season. And that's why injuries are so devastating, because it's not necessarily that this guy is one-to-one with this guy, but, there's those up and down, times during a season where a player who might be in could take up some of that slack.
So, Andy, that was kind of interesting to look at where Rob might fit in the hierarchy of Big Ten point guards right now. And when you project it forward, where he's going to be as a junior and a senior. You look at it right now, Cassius Winston, obviously in a class of his own, and there are 2 other senior point guards, Anthony Cowan, Xavier Simpson. You'd certainly rate those guys ahead of Rob right now just for their production, their experience. Then you've got a group of juniors, Nogel Eastern, Trent Frazier, Demetric Trice, all guys who have been really productive, and that if you were just looking at it for a one-season scenario, you might prefer.
I think really
over
productive is a bit generous for a couple of those guys, but
they've been productive. they've been productive players. They all have holes in their game.
Certainly been on the court.
None of those guys are perfect, but they've been productive. And then after that, you've got whatever Ohio State's point guard situation is going to be. Does DJ Carton take that over? Is it Walker? Somebody else? And then you start looking down, Jamari Wheeler, Geo Baker, McCaffrey's probably going to be playing point guard while Bohannon's out, Marcus Carr, Cam Mack, AJ Turner. I think you would probably take Rob over those guys. So it seems to me right now like he kind of slides in there right in the middle. And then if he has the kind of growth that we think he might, maybe he is better than Demetric Trice or a Trent Frazier or a Nogel Eastern. I don't think he's going to crack the top 3 this year, but I think he's got a chance to get into that maybe second tier. And if he does, that's the path to Indiana, being maybe 4th, 5th, 6th in the conference. But what's nice is when you look beyond that, once Winston, Cowan, and Simpson graduate next year, Rob, slides in. Those other guys aren't clearly going to be better than him, and certainly when they're gone, he kind of projects to be one of the only senior point guards in his class, which is a real reason for optimism over the next couple of years if he stays on kind of the growth trajectory that we expect. Because, as we see in the Big Ten, a lot of times you go as your point guards go, as your guards go. And so I think that's a good sign for Indiana. Where would you slot right now?
That's all of basketball right now is go as your point guard these days.
Yeah. Where would you slot him in, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly isn't where those seniors are, but I do think, the guys that you talked about, Eastern is known more for his defense than his offense, given some of his shooting struggles. Frazier is the guy that you put in that group that to me has been the most productive. Now everybody's got questions about Illinois and who knows what that will be. And then, Trice has had some injury issues. What does he look like without Hap? And that's really a question about Wisconsin in general. But you get past that. I think, DJ Carton's an interesting one as you look at Ohio State, but they've got some other options there where they may share some of those duties. So I think he's right around the, middle of the pack and, to your point, where you'd expect him to be. And it just is, like I said, looking through his game log is something. There's like an 11 game stretch where his offensive rating was under 100, like 8 of those 11. And that, not so surprisingly, coincided with the downfall of IU season. And so I think you could already see like when they were getting steady play from him, and it wasn't necessarily games where he was scoring a lot of points. The team was dramatically more effective. And and really when you look back at last year's team, it's not all that different in the sense that he was really, if you wanted a true point guard, he was the guy that had to work out. And when he didn't work out last year, whether that was because of health or poor play or whatever the case was, the team really struggled. And in that regard, things aren't really different this year, other than the fact that Devontae has a more defined role that does not involve being one of the, primary ball handling options, which I think is, as we've discussed, is best for probably everybody involved. And so I just really underscores how important he is and underscores the fact that if he can't, really continue that growth and provide the things that everybody wants him to do, that things really, could go awry. And that could really be the reason that IU ends up where people are projecting them. And by the same token, if he's able to, play well and do some things more consistently that he was able to do a season ago, why they could exceed those expectations, because it's really, I think whether it's Torvik or anybody else is going to have a hard time projecting what he's going to be, because you've got a lot of noise in the data that he, provided on the stat sheet over the course of his freshman season.
Hey guys, as Andy's talking, I'm looking through last season's scores. I think I want to go jump off a bridge and
not recommended.
Don't do that to yourself.
At Maryland, lose by 3. Rutgers lose by 10 when he should have won it.
Make no excuses.
At home against Iowa, lost by 5.
Why are you doing this? Like,
just talking.
Okay, that's it. No, we're going to break. Why are we allowing this? All right, coming up in our third segment, we will answer your questions, including what we think of Purdue's decision to ban students and faculty from placing bets on Purdue, which hip-hop artists we'd invite to Hoosier Hysteria, a question about minutes, one about recruiting. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. Why would you do that?
What would prompt you to go and try to relive it?
It was, oh my gosh. It was, how many games do we lose by less than 5 points? I guess I just blocked it out. Like, oh man. And the Rutgers game where we should have won that and lost by 10. Like, oh my God. And that was with injuries and everything. And they still were just being like, I would have rather them lost those games by 20. My word.
I would argue the Michigan game was a 20-point deficit. That one wasn't that enjoyable.
True.
Oh, man. All right. So we got some good questions here. So we will get to those. I'll kind of go in the order that I teased them. So we'll see. We'll get to these, and then if we have any time left over at the end, we'll or if we have any questions left over, we'll answer them at the end.
Cool.
All right.
Yes. Okay. Should we just hop into it?
Let's do it.
Do we talk ourselves out with that segment 1 break? I think we did.
Thought maybe Ryan could regale us with some more stories of prior injuries, but
Oof. That one when I was the night before my 21st birthday, that was bad. Like I thought I had wrecked my leg forever. And it has impacted my athletic pursuits ever since. I mean, I was 21. I was still active. Like it's.
Oh man. Okay, let's do this here.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Welcome back to The Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And then after every game, once the season starts, we send out a detailed post-game analysis the morning after. It's the only way that you can get that post-game analysis is on our email. There's over 6,700 people on it right now. So text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866. Or go to assemblycall.com. Time for our mailbag now, guys. All these questions submitted in our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. We had like 5 people join this week, so that thing is really, really picking up some steam, gaining some members as we head toward the season. All these questions from them. So let's start with this one from Coach, because when Coach submits a question, we go to that one first. Purdue just banned faculty and students from betting on Purdue athletics now that sports wagering is legal in Indiana. Is this a good move, and should Indiana University consider a similar proposal? It's certainly a good move if they want to save money, because when has betting on Purdue sports really ever
we would never advise anyone to do that under any circumstances, regardless of your profession, status as an athlete. Doesn't matter.
Remember how hyped they were coming into the year for football? How's that going?
That was really just too easy of a joke. But seriously, like, how are they going to enforce that? Really,
yeah, that's the thing. What's like, how are you going to go check the dorms to make sure nobody's hooked up to whatever bookie online bookmaker they're using? I don't get the. I think it just feels moralistic, like they're trying to impose. It's a moral thing, not like a logistical or whatever. It's just like, oh, you shouldn't gamble. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't gamble, but I don't want anybody telling me I can't. Like, it's
okay.
I just think it seems stupid. I don't know. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah. There's not really a way to police it, so it's just saying something to kind of present yourself in a way that is okay. We're trying to prevent this, even though there's no way for us to prevent this. So yeah, to me, it just seems like I'm doing this because I have to, but I'm not actually going to do anything about it.
Yeah, someone in the chat just said, I bet nobody under 21 there drinks either. Like, it's, I mean, you're not going to, like, it's just, yeah, and IU is a dry campus. Like, it's, come on, just, people are going to do what they want to do.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, this is from David. Given the recent news from KU, if IU were to invite a hip-hop artist to perform at Hoosier Hysteria, who would you want to invite? He says, I asked this tongue-in-cheek, not believing we should actually do it.
Yo, this is Sneep Dio Double Dizzle.
Ryan, who would you choose? Our listeners know that I will take any excuse to play that drop.
Tupac's still alive,
Tupac
right?
hologram.
He's still alive, right? It's I don't know.
Some people think so.
Like, it's let's invite Snoop and just embrace it. Why not?
I don't know that many hip hop artists.
Honestly, yeah, I can sense you guys.
I know a lot of old hip hop artists, but
yeah, I was like, most of the ones that I would have said are dead. So that felt like.
Yeah. Could we get Curtis Blow to come do basketball? Because I think that would be pretty cool. Basketball Jones, maybe? Like, those. That's hip hop, right?
That's more R&B, but we'll let it slide.
Okay. Well, so there you go. You asked that question to us, and we don't have a lot of great answers.
That was a terrible answer. If I had to pick somebody more recent, I would say I'll go with Chance the Rapper, just to give an actual like reasonable answer instead of saying that everyone we liked is deceased or.
I mean, he's from the Midwest, right? He's from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll go with him.
More about Chance the Rapper than I do.
All right. We'll go with him. Okay, this question from Jay is interesting. He says, last year, 9 guys played at least 25% of the available minutes. Same thing in Archie's first season. Which 9 guys will play at least 25% of the minutes this season?
Well, now I got to open up the roster.
Okay, so we can obviously, we know for sure.
I'm doing the same thing, which speaks well to our preparation.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's for the down the roster guys. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, okay, Rob, Devontae, Al will. I think we can all agree that Justin Smith will. I think it's safe to say that Joey Brunk will. I think it's safe to say that Trace Jackson will. That's 6 right
You got
there.
Duran in there, right?
No, I don't yet. But because what I want to say is he absolutely will if he's healthy. But he's a swing guy here. Because you saw how important he was to the lineup last year, and Indiana's 1-loss record with and without him. I mean, I think he's got to play 45 to 55% of the minutes for this team to really get where they want to go.
Ideally,
so I put him in there.
Yeah.
So that's 7. And,
I would put.
Then
Did you
Jerome
you
Hunter,
didn't say Jerome yet, right?
Haven't said Jerome, but I'm starting to feel more comfortable projecting him for minutes. The other guy that may be the most obvious candidate to get in there, I mean, Race Thompson certainly you would say has a chance, but it's a crowded front court. Armand Franklin may be able to slip his way in there because he's the fourth ball handler.
Yeah.
I
would think he may play out of necessity this year.
That's what I mean.
Not even that he's one of the 9 best, but it's just the positional situation there. I think we're downgrading Race Thompson as well. I think that it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. But I think Race could be a guy that jumps out and plays 30 minutes in a random game in the middle of the year and does really well. But I think he's going to be involved. I think Archie wants him involved. And so we'll see how it plays out during the year. But everything I've heard is that Archie really likes him and wants him to play. You're right. It's a crowded front court. So they'll have to be creative with how they use him.
Did we forget anybody obvious?
Demizzi's really the only other guy who would be in that discussion.
That's right. We only have 11 players this year. I forgot.
Yeah, so that made it easy. We perhaps could have approached that a different way, but nonetheless. I mean, it's really at that point, if you assume reasonable health for Duran and Jerome, then you're really saying you got to pick one of Armand, Demizzi, and Race. I would lean Race, but I could see the argument for Armand just from a depth perspective positionally.
I mean, knock on wood, you're one injury away from Armand Franklin having to play 25 minutes a game, 20 minutes a game.
Yeah.
I mean, so, hopefully that doesn't happen, obviously. Nice for Jay to actually ask a good question. He's had a string of really poor questions that he's asked. Nice to see
Jay on blast on a Thursday night.
Nice to see him actually ask a good one. Okay. Josh says, as we are heading into the full swing of practice, who is your first gold jersey winner? I'm assuming he means, who would you want to see win the first gold jersey? Does it matter? Would you want to see Devontae win it because he's a captain?
Or are we predicting who's going to win?
Maybe we're predicting. Take it any way you want. Okay. Predict it.
I'm saying Joey Brunk is going to win
it. I'm actually going to go with Jerome Hunter because if he's playing, he's going to be the most productive player out there, I think. So
I'll say Devontae.
But I also don't know how much they're limiting him in practice.
It's true.
In terms of time. So Devontae's probably
Brunk is going to be the set the example for everybody guy, and he's going to win one.
Yeah, I just don't know how that. I don't know how that translates to the gold jersey scenario. So
yeah, I don't either. We don't know the criteria.
Nor do any of us. But
yeah,
we're guessing. Come on, we're allowed to guess.
We are.
I like Luke's question.
Luke's question. Yeah, this is a good one. So, what is one thing you would go back and change in Indiana basketball history if you could go back and change just one thing? I think longtime listeners of this show will know pretty quickly which one Andy and I will pick.
Go ahead.
Alan Henderson's injury in 1993. Although, Dennis in the community, came over the top and kind of slam dunked everybody with the real correct answer, which is, Landon Turner not getting injured.
Yeah,
that's if we all could actually do it, that's the one that everybody would pick. But if we're talking about
just strictly basketball,
in the game stuff.
I've got a good one.
Yeah, the Alan Henderson would definitely be one for me. Just to see to have watched your favorite team that you love more than any other team of that be able to win a national championship, as I think everybody believed they would have been pretty special. So
I think the most awful, gaping, emotional wound from my childhood. I would.
A close second would be Ryan not going back through last year's schedule, though. If we in the prior segment, if that would have been good, but
I think I've got a good one. Mike Conley and Greg Oden picking IU instead of Ohio State. That might have changed.
That is.
They took Ohio State to a national championship game as freshmen. I think that would have changed a lot of things at IU because IU actually had some decent guys coming back, and that would have fit very well. So that's one that I can think of off the top of my head that would have been a program changer, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one. Scott Mays, broken arm in the chat came up, and not hiring Kelvin Sampson. What is another one that came up in the chat?
Tom Coverdale having a good ankle in 2002. Would like to see that.
What would have been really funny about Kelvin Sampson not getting hired? Do you know who else was on the list to be hired?
John Beeline.
Nope.
Wasn't that when Beeline was on the list?
He was.
Or was that when we hired? Or was that when we hired Crean?
It would have been Crean. I think Crean was the second choice. He had just had his whole Dwayne Wade thing and everything. He was very high on Crean.
It would have been Crean then.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is instead of like if Sampson hadn't been kind of forced on Greenspan, I think Greenspan would have hired Crean, and then he got
that
his.
That is how you're a champion.
That is. Okay, we've got about a minute and a half left. Let's see which. Oh, let's get to Kent's question real quick. He says, as of now, IU has 3 players committed for the 2020 class. Of course, we all want Dawson Garcia to join the class. Yes, we do. But he will not decide until November. Do you want IU to add a point guard in the class of 2020? Diarra, Curbelo, I don't think has in Indiana. I think he either announced the Final Five and Indiana wasn't in it, or he announced official visits and Indiana wasn't there. There's that Carter Witt guy, but I think everyone thinks he's going to stay out east. So really it's Diarra or nobody, it seems like. And he's, a lot of people think Texas A&M is in there, Indiana's in there, Georgia's looked at him.
Yeah, they could have to look for a transfer if they want to add a guard.
Yeah, so, but do you want to see Indiana add a young point guard in 2020, even if it means that it makes the Christian Lander recruitment a little bit more difficult? But we do need depth behind Rob Phinisee, as we keep saying.
I don't think it's going to affect the Christian Lander recruitment at all. Just like I think whoever committed to Indiana before Romeo Langford didn't have any effect on Romeo Langford, because those are guys who are going to play no matter what. It's not like they have to worry about the depth chart. I don't think.
Don't reach for one. Don't reach for a 4-year guy. But if you can get a good, solid 4-star guy like Diarra, take him in a heartbeat. That's what I say.
For sure. I agree. I think that, and I think the roster will work itself out.
I'd almost say Phinisee and IU's heavy pursuit of Lander might impact somebody else wanting to sign more so than the other way around.
Yeah, I would agree with that significantly.
Yeah, it's a very good point. All righty, that is going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music that you hear on the show, and thank you for listening. We will talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right.
So some people were...
Nice job, fellas.
Some people in the chat were talking about it. I think it was Jay was saying that Beeline was the choice. Beeline was certainly high on the list during the Sampson pursuit. So he says that Beeline had an agreement in place to become coach. I am not sure that is been verified. I know some people have mentioned that. I was on campus during that. I was working at the IDS. We were researching all the candidates and everything. The guy who was right at the top of Greenspan's list personally was Tom Crean. They knew each other, and he was right there. I know that he was interested. He was very interested in Beeline as well. I don't think Beeline was leaving West Virginia at that point. That's just my personal belief. But I do know what he's saying right now is actually true, is that Herbert, the president, wanted Kelvin Sampson, and that's who wound up being hired. But I don't know if this part's being true, that they had to hire a minority. I don't believe that, but Greenspan, I don't know if that's true. I mean, I know that Herbert was the guy, and he decided to pick Kelvin Sampson. Beeline, I know they're saying, there's other people who are saying Beeline had an agreement. I don't know that that's true. I know he was certainly involved, and I know that Tom Crean was near the top of the list as well. So that's that. I mean, it's all
rough night for Jay. First, Jerod calls out his questions. Ryan calls him a liar. Rough night.
No, he could be true. He could be right about the Beeline thing. I know some people who do not believe that is true, that they believe the Beeline was certainly one of the guys and may even have taken the job, but that it was not official or in any way or agreed to in any way, but that he was in the mix and that Crean was also on that list and in the mix. So
Jay just pulled out the trump card and said Galen has talked about this at length.
Yeah, I mean, I was there at the time too, and I heard a lot of the same stories that Galen heard. I mean, we all have our sources in the matter. But yes, Beeline was certainly somebody that was talked to, I think. But yeah, that was just such a weird hiring process because we were, interviewing people, we were talking to people, all of that stuff, and we were hearing all these names and everything like that, and Kelvin Sampson didn't come up once. And then all of a sudden we got called into the newsroom. They're like, yeah, we got a tip. It's Kelvin Sampson. We were all just like, what? Because you have a list. You have a list of guys. And I think the reaction initially was pretty positive because Sampson had been so successful at Oklahoma, and
because he's a good coach.
And that's the thing is
ethically compromised, but he's a good coach.
Well, the thing was that everybody at the time was saying the phone call thing wasn't that big a deal because it was a rule that had changed, and he had kind of explained it away, and everybody at Oklahoma felt like, yeah, it wasn't that big a deal. And everybody
needs to start doing that stuff after the rule changes. He's got this habit of doing it right before the rule changes.
Mm-hmm. No, and what
timing right?
The thing about the phone calls, everybody's like, this is something that everybody does. They just got caught doing it. It's really not a big deal. It's not like he was paying players or whatever. The problem with Sampson wound up being the academic side of things. I mean, that was the real problem. The phone calls, whatever, but it was the academic stuff was, I mean, that was stuff we heard in Bloomington, working for a newspaper in Columbus, like being around the program in Bloomington. We heard about that stuff like all the time, that there was that kind of stuff going on, that guys just weren't even going to class or whatever. Like when you have those rumors going around town in your first 2 years as the head coach, that's bad. That's really bad. And it was initial. So
Billy Hollingsworth said Larry Bird staying at IU.
That's a big one.
That'd be a fun one. That would be Wilt Chamberlain coming to IU. That would have been interesting. Couldn't pay what Kansas was going to pay though. Some things haven't changed.
My times have changed.
Have not changed. Oh man! All right. So next week let's plan to do Justin Smith next week.
Smith. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to chew on there. We got 2 years of data on him, and boy, he's an X factor for this team for sure.
Although I don't feel like he's gotten talked about as much in the offseason. You know what I mean? Like everybody's focused a lot on Devontae in the front court.
Remember last year he was the big topic.
Yeah, maybe that's for the best.
Well, remember last year it was like, okay, breakout candidate, yeah, Justin Smith. Like it was just assumed because of how he finished the season, which maybe should give us a little caution with Devontae Green, putting so much on how he finished the season. But I'm not approaching that with caution. I'm full board president of the fan club, so I'm all about it. But Justin will be interesting because there's a path to Indiana being successful that doesn't involve him being like a starter or a huge part of the rotation. But I think for Indiana to really, obviously to reach its ceiling, he needs to be one of the 5 best players. Can he be that? I don't know. Next week on the assembly call. Join us. Ryan has spider fingers now as he types.
I'm dealing with the chat mob.
Dealing with the chat mob.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Well, hey, go deal with your ankle. Take care of that.
I will. Yeah, it's time to ice and elevate again.
Yes, it is. You got to be fully healthy by February.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, 39.
We're getting older, man.
I'm 39. It might take till that long.
That's what I'm saying. So we need you back in full health. Next week is going to be Cameron's going to be on. Cam Drummond. So
do you need, is one of us going to be gone? Is Andy going to be off?
Wow, that was hurtful.
No, I was wondering, are we just doing 3 or are we going to do 4?
No, I guess we can try. Let's figure that out. Because if we're all available, then we might move. Maybe we'll move his appearance to the next week. We'll see. I didn't know if one of you guys would need the week off. So if you don't and you can all do it, then we can. I think he's available the next week too.
Yeah, I'm okay. We'll probably need to figure out Halloween being on a Thursday, just to give you a few weeks notice. We may need to.
Oh crap! Halloween's on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's on the 31st this year. Really sneaks up.
I think we should do it in costume. I think that would be hilarious.
Okay.
I'm just saying that would be great. We could also do it like if you guys have to do trick or treating and stuff. We record it later.
Yeah, we could. We may need to. We may need to bump it.
Well, later I'll have had 5 or 6 beers while I walked around with kids trick or treating, so that could get.
And dressed up, drunk, Andy. That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. Okay,
ratings gold.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Got to give the people what they want. That's right.
Jay would like you to just sit there and be wrong in your wrongness, Ryan.
Todd Sony says he's been in costume every show.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we will figure it out.
Brent Quinn has asked multiple times about this Jeremiah April audio that you promised earlier.
Oh, the April audio.
So I would be remiss if I did not call that out.
Yeah. Okay. So let's listen to that real quick. That's a good note to end on. So I played these 2 little clips, but here I'll play some of this conversation. And we can just stop it as we go if there's comments that we want to make. But again, Andy, you weren't here. This was the first game of the season. Indiana won by 50 points.
So glad that I'm not tied to this in any way. That's good.
It was the debut of James Blackman Jr., Robert Johnson, Max Hotzel. So it was a lot of guys' first game. Indiana just went off and killed them, obviously. But here's where we started talking about Jeremiah April, Ryan. So if you want to, this will be like Pod Save America where we can play OK Stop. And you can just say stop if you want to. Here you go.
The rebounding was the most impressive thing for me.
Listen to that voice.
Oh, when you got Max Hotzel in there grabbing 9 of them, that'll do it.
What were we using to record?
Yeah, and that terror on the boards, Jeremy April with 2. Not Jeremiah.
Okay. Stop. Let's stop expecting.
Kept calling him Jeremy, so I was making fun of you.
Yeah, they kept calling him on the broadcast. They were calling him Jeremy April, and so you were very frustrated by it. This was a recurring theme throughout the show.
Okay,
in your opening.
I thought Ryan was really establishing himself as anti-Jeremiah April earlier, by basically being so dismissive of him that he wasn't even going to say his correct name, which would have been a good move, really, if you had distanced yourself from him early. But nevertheless,
no, he doesn't. No, Ryan comes back around. Just wait.
Right. So the Big Ten Network announcers tonight, they are mispronouncing, Jeremiah April's name. I was wishing we had the student guys back there again because they did a much better job. Kudos.
Some things never change. That still holds true.
Much more prepared. I would say that. I also think that clearly the Big Ten Network guys did not think that Jeremiah April was going to even get in this game, which a lot of people didn't think he was going to play in this game, and clearly
when he got in, I tweeted Jeremiah April is real.
Yeah, I mean,
let's say this about Tom Crean. I mean, he has a history of recruiting big men that don't ever see the floor. And all we'd heard about with Jeremiah April is the infamous boot.
That still checks out.
He'd done some warm-ups. But okay, let's talk about him real quick before we get into Zeisloft and a few of the other guys. It's hard to take a lot from him getting in there for 8 minutes of non-competitive basketball. So here are my 2 observations. He looked more fluid than I thought, simply because of his size and because of the injury.
Shit, you just said the same thing about
well out there.
Ryan said the same thing about Trace.
That little turnaround jump shot he had. I mean, even if he's doing that against a chair, that's a nice little shot because he's tall enough that he can get that kind of shot off against a lot of guys. Now, would he have the confidence to do that at the Breslin Center, with 2 minutes left in a game down 4 points?
We'll never know.
We're not going to ask him to do that.
We never know. We never got to see.
The fact that he has that kind of skill and can flash it in his first time out on the court at Assembly Hall, if we're looking for things to be encouraged about, I thought for his first time out on the floor, pretty solid.
Now here comes
One
Ryan.
thing I love about April, and this showed in his tape too, is he'll catch the ball high and won't bring it down and will keep it high and turn around. And you saw it on that jumper. He kind of had the ball about his chest. And instead of bringing it down to swing through or something, he kept it high and then shot it. And it's a little thing, and he's still got a long way to go. But, that kind of instinct is great for a guy who's 6'11", And I will say this about Jeremiah April. He is every bit of 6'11". He is a big dude. And
he is a big dude.
And it's nice to see some size on this roster, even if it's an inexperienced freshman who may not see the floor very much. At least there's some size somewhere. And, he's a guy who is a lot. I think he's center. There wasn't a whole lot of tape on him coming out of prep school, but I think that he's a guy who has a lot of potential if he can just sort of continue to develop.
Yes. We spent the first
To be fair, Ryan did not say over what period of time he would need to still develop. So indeterminate could still be happening right now. We don't know.
That's true. I will say I did my banner moment from that game on Hunter Perea. He was the big story coming out of that game.
Wow.
And it was 8 minutes long before you started talking. 8 minutes. I don't know if that's because you came late. I'm not quite sure, but it had to be the longest intro that I've ever done. Good Lord. If I ever do that, just cut me off if it goes that long.
I try to often.
Jeez. Yeah, but 8 minutes. Good grief.
That little turnaround jump shot he had.
What were we recording on? God, it sounds horrible.
I think, okay, so that was 2015, 2012. I mean, that was I think that was YouTube because that was the fourth season. I think we'd started doing video by then. So I think that was straight when we were doing Google Hangouts on air, straight to YouTube.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure we were off Blog Talk Radio by then.
Yeah, I think so too, but it was probably Google Hangouts. That makes sense.
As Jay Horry said, April was still playing college basketball last year. So
he's still developing
at Wheeling University, dropping those turnaround jump shots. If only we'd had him at the Breslin Center against Michigan State, the prophecy could have been fulfilled.
Yeah.
But alas.
Yeah.
It was like a Game of Thrones prophecy. Ridiculous and unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And poorly written.
It's so good. We should do that more, where we just play old audio and I make snarky comments over it. That worked out well.
I want to try and go back and find certain stuff, especially from the early days. It just amuses me to hear our ridiculous voices. But
well,
oh well. If you have clips that you would like us to find, email Jerod at
That should be a weekly thing. Like just you do like a 10-minute show where you hop on and just play an old clip and middle of the day.
We do at some point. We do need to go back and relive the Kentucky show because that is the start. The first
you re-released that one another time, and I listened to the whole thing again. It was It was just as funny.
It's so ridiculous. The Kentucky game when I hosted the whole thing by myself and was like incoherent for 5 minutes.
I called in on my way home from work. I'd been at work all day and I hadn't really watched the game. It was impressive. Yeah, what are you gonna do? You missed it. You did miss a chance. Coach was calling for his drop to be used during the analysis of Jeremiah April, the one that you
you dumbass. I have a mad crush on Archie Miller and.
All right, there's other sports going on. I need to exit, but good show, boys.
What that are more important than talking about Jeremiah April? You should do a big lead story on that, on the legend of the turnaround jumper. See how that goes with your new corporate.
I'll pass because I'd probably get fired. Jeremiah, who's this
what if I told you?
April guy?
What if I told you 30 for 30? Oh, man. Okay. This has gone off the rails. Sorry to everybody still listening. Jay Horry, April had 3 points against Gannon last season.
Well, there you go. Tied into this year.
Turnaround jump shot and one, baby.
I will say that is a guy who looked huge on the court. Like he looked enormous. I mean, I know he's.
Did you ever see him in person?
No, not in person. Not that I remember seeing him. I don't think so.
He did look big.
He looks huge on the court, and usually a lot of times, like a 6'11" guy won't look that like huge because he'll be next to other 6'8", 6'7", whatever. But he looked enormous, and I think it's because IU had so little size at that time that he just stood out.
Area man claims 6'11" guy was big.
I mean, he looked big though.
This is the analysis people tune into the show for.
There's a lot of things that everyone really wanted to back off of from that original analysis of him, but I like that Ryan is doubling down on.
I'm leaning into it. Yeah. Leaning into it.
That's
all right. I gotta go.
All right. Well,
all right,
with
that,
later, guys.
See you next week.
All right. See you.
See you. Oh man, that's good stuff.